a new African Union-led initiative to try to end the war in Sudan is underway in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. An AU official said he was hopeful that a coalition of civilian groups would join. He said Sudanese people were living under terrible conditions, with millions on the verge of death by war and famine. He said the AU was trying to persuade the warring sides to agree to a ceasefire. Meanwhile, the city of El Fasher, which is the Sudanese army's last foothold in the western region of Darfur, remains in the grip of a punishing battle between the army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. Well, from all this, I'm joined now in the studio by the international security analyst, certified anti-terrorism specialist, and Africa representative of the Anti-Terrorism Accreditation Board, David Otto. Good to see you, David.
Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed for coming in. So yet another attempt to try to push the warring sides in Sudan to the negotiating table. What more can you tell us about this latest AU initiative? Because the signs seem to suggest that it is failing after key political groups declined to attend.
Yes, I mean, this is the concern. You know, since this war began in April of 2023, so practically we're about 15 months into that. We've had several of these kind of initiatives, you know, from IGAD, which is the regional body, from the likes of the United States. The AU initially got into this a week after the conflict breakout. You know, I think that was on the 23rd of April. And then they set up this high panel that was specifically to bring together a conflict resolution mechanism. This is the fourth attempt by the AU. And one of the biggest challenges that they've had is actually getting belligerent factors, you know, to attend. Some of them, for example, the Sudanese armed forces, you know, would accuse the AU or any other party, you know, of, bias, and some of them would say if this particular belligerent actor is on board, then of course we are not attending. So there has been this disagreement in terms of who is on the table, as opposed to who is going to be discussed on the menu. So you've got this, AU calling for this fourth high-level panel, you know, to discuss the resolution of the conflict. It's not going to work because, of course, we have a scenario, Charles, whereby both the Rapid Support Forces of General Hemeti and the Sudanese Armed Forces, have come to a point where consolidation of critical infrastructure is their primary focus. No one wants to have any kind of a resolution that is lasting or sustainable if the critical infrastructures are not in hand. So the struggle to gain some dominance, between both belligerent factors is one of the key, impediments of any ceasefire agreements that have failed severally.
Right.
But also, one of the issues that we've seen is that there are so many parties that seem or appear to want to get involved in resolving the conflict. These parties are seen as having critical interest, either by one side or the other. And that, again, is one of the problems that the AU would face. Yeah.
And as you mentioned, we already know of the Saudi Arabia and US-led talks in Jeddah, which has so far failed to produce a ceasefire. So this African Union initiative, there was so much hope placed on it because it was going to be different.
Yes, the African Union argued that one of the strengths that they would have in this particular discussion would be to bring together the UN mechanism, the Jeddah mechanism, the US, bringing all parties on the table rather than having, different initiatives taking place, for different political or security interests. So we thought, this specific high panel meeting by the AU would be where each party are going to unite. But I think specifically what the AU was looking to achieve was to bring all the key parties, the civilian population, the belligerent, the IGAD, UN, Jeddah, which is of course Saudi Arabia, the US. But again, some of the parties refused to attend.
And it's interesting that this time it was a lot of the civilian groups that said they were not going to attend because they felt that representatives from the Bashir Omar's
Yes.
sort of the previous leader's
Yes.
government, regime, were going to be in attendance.
And of course, and this has been one of the biggest issues. We have the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces claiming authority over Sudan, when indeed they were beneficiaries of a coup d'etat in 2019, despite the fact that the international community has always bashed down on Omar al-Bashir's brutal regime. These two parties did not get power legitimately. Of course, they connived, to take out a civilian government, irrespective of how you look at it. So what you're facing now is civilians saying, none of these parties have legitimacy over the sovereignty of the state, because of course, they failed to transition the government. So the civilians are also not very happy in terms of what is going on. But I think what we see now is the guys with guns, making the big decisions, and that's the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, and of course the Sudanese Armed Forces.
So, as an international security analyst, to you, the signs are pretty grim.
Yes.
That the warring sides are just not willing to put aside their differences, even to take part in preliminary talks, never mind getting to a ceasefire.
And I think that's simply because, time has increased the factor of disunity rather than bringing some semblance of unity between these two warring factions. So there's a lot of external interest. Fighting a war for this long requires a lot of support, direct military support. And these factions are getting this support from external and internal parties that are interested.
Right.
So at this point in time, it becomes very difficult to find a middle ground. So I think the reason why the AU was calling for this specific event, or if you want to call it that, which of course it is, was to find a way to kind of synchronize the interests of all parties, including the civilian population. But again, I thought, too many people on the table will never result in any kind
absolutely.
of, a long-lasting resolution.
Yeah.
So I think principally the framework, was bound to fail at the initial. Yeah.
Meanwhile, of course, the city of El Fasher, that is the Sudanese army's last foothold in Darfur, remains in the grip of that battle between the army and the RSF.
Yeah, this has been a trend, Charles, throughout. Both the RSF and the Sudanese Armed Forces have been fighting to consolidate critical infrastructure, because the more critical infrastructure you have, the more leverage you will have on the negotiation table. So this fighting between RSF and the SAF, it's going to continue, and none of the sides are ready to give out, to give way to the other, and this is what is going to continue as long as we don't go back to the last known good, which is try and reconcile both the generals, because this is a fight between two men, and the people that are suffering are the Sudanese population. The AU was trying to have an African-led and a Sudanese-owned initiative, but it's not working.
And who do you reckon is gaining the upper hand in terms of the fight? Because we know, for example, that El Fasher is the Sudanese army's last foothold in Darfur. So basically they've been losing ground and the RSF have been gaining. But I mean, that's in Darfur. I mean, I wonder what the picture is across Sudan.
Yeah, so you see what is going on is you have some sort of a conventional warfare within a civilian context or a civil context, in the sense that it is being fought between belligerent parties of the same nation. So even if the Sudanese army were to lose El Fasher to the RSF, what would then happen is that they would then go, asymmetric. So so it's very difficult, even though you can win, an outright battle. Then what happens is that how much time do you have, or how much resources do you have to consolidate that, and stop your enemy or your opponent from taking that back away from you. So it's not a matter of just winning a particular battle.
Yes, I see what you mean.
It's then how much you can sustain the holding of that
consolidation.
And consolidate. Yeah. And considering the fact that both sides have huge support, both internally and externally. So it's not it's not just about winning today or winning a particular battle. It's how much you can win today, tomorrow, and in future. Yeah.
And the rest of the country living under terrible conditions, millions on the verge of death as a result of the war and famine. So if the bullets and bombs don't get you, hunger will.
Of course, the African Union talked about silencing the guns, but we've seen an uprising of, guns. If bullets don't get you, hunger will.
Yeah.
Sudan is proving to be one of the most devastating conflicts, in recent times, and the level of hunger that is ongoing, it's unprecedented. Now the question is, for how long is that going to last? And what is the African Union going to do in practice? They can't deploy any standby force because the conflict is so scattered in such a way that you cannot demarcate between the grounds held by the RSF or the grounds held by the Sudanese Armed Forces. So that option is not there. And you cannot threaten to use force against any of the belligerent actors because, of course, that force may just give another belligerent actor an upper hand. So it's a very difficult situation. The reason being, the African Union left it quite late. Now, it's a global
it's a right royal mess.
And I think for me, the biggest concern now is Sudan being what it is, with the history of having Al-Qaeda and ISIS, is that possibly you could see a situation where ISIS and Al-Qaeda could begin to use the Sudanese ground.
The hallmarks of a failed state, basically.
Exactly.
David, thank you very much indeed. David Otto is an international security analyst, certified anti-terrorism specialist, and Africa representative of the Anti-Terrorism Accreditation Board. Thank you very much, David.